All was quiet on a dark Denver, Colorado street one evening in February 2024 when a woman was suddenly seen running away from a pickup truck that was chasing after her. A local resident's doorbell camera captured footage of the woman desperately trying to get away from her pursuer, who followed her along a narrow path between homes that vehicles don't normally go down. Footage of the terrifying chase went viral, with many people wanting to know whether the woman was okay and if the perpetrator was arrested. Investigators tracked her down in a safe place and learned that the man behind the wheel of the pickup truck had forced her into his vehicle. The video of the victim running away from the truck had been captured in the midst of her attempt to escape the man. She had eventually succeeded, and the suspect was arrested the following day on suspicion of kidnapping, extortion, assault, and violating a protective order. Due to the sensitive nature of the situation, authorities declined to reveal the names of the suspect or the victim, and they released limited details about the case. But people were just happy to learn that the woman was okay and that steps were being taken to keep her safe. Number 26, near miss in Missouri. An Independence, Missouri woman was jogging in broad daylight in August of 2023 when a shirtless man rushed up behind her and fired a gunshot which narrowly missed her head. A doorbell camera at a nearby residence captured the incident on video, which showed the jogger falling to the ground while the gunman fled on foot. The woman was terrified but physically unharmed. Shortly after the incident, police received a call from a local business about a shirtless man covered in blood. While investigating the scene, officers learned about a burglary and car theft that had occurred nearby. The cops tracked down the stolen car and discovered blood on the interior, furthering their suspicions that it was somehow connected to the shirtless gunman. Police also noticed signs of a break-in at a nearby home where an 88-year-old man lived, including blood on the front door and a shattered window. Helicopters and canines joined the search for the suspects, but he somehow managed to slip out of sight. Updates have not been forthcoming, indicating that he's most likely still at large. Number 25, Austin Lynn Walker. In May of 2024, a concerned mother dialed 911 and reported the presence of a knife-wielding stranger on the front porch of her Kilgore, Texas home. She had received an alert to the activity from her doorbell camera, and her 2 children were home alone at the time. The unwanted visitor, later identified as 25-year-old Austin Lynn Walker, frantically rang the doorbell, which captured footage of him looking around in an obviously paranoid state. Of course, nobody answered the door, and it would come as no surprise when the homeowner later learned that the suspect was high on methamphetamine. Officers arrived within minutes and took a tactical approach to arresting Walker due to the large blade he was holding. Thankfully, they managed to take him into custody without incident, and he was booked on charges of public intoxication and criminal trespass. In the family's yard, police found clothing, a Bible, and the knife that the suspect had been seen holding in the doorbell video. Even a quick glance at Walker's criminal record provides enough evidence to know that it was a smart idea not to answer the door when he came knocking. In 2022, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for kidnapping a girl and holding her for ransom, with credit for time served in pre-trial detention. Following his most recent arrest, he was booked into the Rusk County Jail with bail set at $5,000. Number 24, Dominic Austin. 2 households were tormented by a nightmarish neighbor at their Gresham, Oregon apartment building over a several-month period, started in June of 2023. During that time, their doorbell captured footage of the suspect, 19-year-old Dominic Austin, swinging a knife back and forth, uttering racial slurs and derogatory remarks about women, and trying to open the locked front door with the weapon in his hand. He also made various threats, including to paralyze, murder, and render the victims wheelchair bound. The families complained to the building's management nearly 20 times over a 2.5-month period. Over that same time span, police responded to the property on at least 7 occasions. One victim, who was pregnant, throughout the harassment campaign, wrote in an email to management that she was afraid she was going to go into early labor. Due to the stress of the situation, she was scared to leave her apartment, forcing her to rely on her husband to carry out ordinary tasks like bringing the groceries inside, and she feared for her husband's safety when he went outside. The woman said that she believed it was only a matter of time before Austin's behavior escalated into physical violence. Her daughter, who lived in a nearby unit, complained of constant anxiety and described being woken up multiple times throughout the night by Austin's unwelcome visits to her doorstep. And the harassment continued even after the court issued an anti-stalking order against Austin. The landlord eventually served Austin and his father with eviction papers after the victims threatened legal action, and he was finally arrested 10 days later. He was charged with 33 crimes, including 3 counts of first-degree attempted burglary, 4 counts of unlawful use of a weapon, 13 counts of menacing, 10 counts of violating an anti-stalking order, and 3 counts of bias crime. The case is currently stalled while Austin undergoes mental health treatment after being found incompetent to stand trial. If his mental health improves to the point of competency, the proceedings against him will resume. In the meantime, the victims are suing the police and their landlord for $6 million for failing to effectively handle the situation at an earlier point in time. Number 23. Anti-Asian robbery crew. During the summer of 2023, families of Asian descent were targeted in a string of over a dozen violent burglaries throughout South Seattle. The home invasions were carried out by members of an organized robbery crew who did not hesitate to threaten, restrain, and assault their victims, many of whom were elderly, as they forced their way inside and ransacked the residences. During one of the robberies, a man's doorbell camera captured footage of 2 masked men ambushing him at the entrance to his home. The victim did not try to fight the suspects but was nevertheless tased at gunpoint by the thieves. A multi-agency investigation eventually led to the arrests of several suspects in connection with the burglaries. 28-year-old DeMarcus Pate, 26-year-old Delorno Habtai, 32-year-old Tyrone Ma, and 30-year-old Javez Tubbs were charged with unlawful gun possession. 23-year-old Jaquan Jameson and an unnamed teenager were charged with burglary. At the time of the arrests, the gun charges were being used merely as placeholders in order to keep the suspects in custody. Amid the ongoing investigation, authorities said it was likely that additional charges would follow as new developments were made. In early 2023, prosecutors announced additional charges against DeMarcus Pate and Javez Tubbs, including hate crime, assault in the 3rd degree, and burglary in the 1st degree. According to prosecutors, the pair committed 3 burglaries in less than 2 hours one day, along with other burglaries that occurred during the spate of home invasions. During a search of Tubbs's home, police found a journal containing more than 100 addresses, some of which belonged to robbery victims. Pate and Tubbs are accused of targeting the victims because of their race and have pleaded not guilty to the charges. According to the most recent available updates, the investigation into the robbery ring and the defendants' criminal cases are ongoing. Number 22. Brian Allen Warren. Tyler and Brittany Thee were fast asleep at their home in El Mirage, Arizona, in August of 2023, when a shirtless and barefoot man approached their front door at around 5 o'clock in the morning. The couple had turned off their doorbell camera security notifications to avoid waking their young daughter, and continued to snooze away as the stranger took a lighter out of his pocket and set fire to a decorative wreath on their front door. Brittany and Tyler only realized that something was amiss when Tyler noticed the burnt smell as he left for work that morning. By the time he discovered the damage to the front door, the arsonist was long gone. The Thees reviewed their doorbell camera footage and were shocked to discover what had happened. In the video, the suspect could be seen casually leaning against a pillar as he watched the wreath burn for several minutes. He seemed unfazed by the fire, even as the flames spread to the ceiling, and calmly walked away when he was done enjoying the spectacle. The incident left Brittany feeling so scared that she lost sleep. Worried that the arsonist would return, she shared the security footage on TikTok in hopes that someone would be able to identify the man. She soon learned that the suspect, 34-year-old Brian Allan Warren, was familiar to police. In fact, law enforcement had spoken with him about an unrelated incident about an hour before his visit to the These residence. Warren turned himself in after he saw the surveillance video of himself circulating on social media and was charged with several felonies, including arson and endangerment. He told police that he was blacked out after a night of partying and claimed that he thought he was lighting a cigar at his girlfriend's house when he set the wreath ablaze. Number 21. Marcus Jenkins and Tristan Wright. Florida couple Kim Chambliss and Val Dela Cruz went home $3,300 richer one night in August of 2024 after hitting the jackpot on a slot machine at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tampa. They were unaware that a pair of sticky-fingered onlookers had watched them gambling during their 2-hour visit to the casino and were following them home. As Chambliss and Dela Cruz approached their front door, the suspects ambushed them in their driveway. Later identified as 34-year-old Marcus Jenkins and 36-year-old Tristan Wright, the thieves demanded the couple's winnings, then opened fire on them. Chambliss managed to make it inside the house after being shot once in the back of the leg, while Dela Cruz took bullets to both legs. As he scrambled for the front door, he begged the assailants not to hurt him anymore, but they fired one last bullet into his leg before fleeing the scene with the couple's money, a watch, and Kim's purse. Chambliss and Dela Cruz suffered serious injuries and Dela Cruz lost a lot of blood, but they both thankfully survived. The incident was captured on surveillance video, which the couple turned over to the police, and the arrests of Jenkins and Wright soon followed. Jenkins was charged with a laundry list of crimes including attempted murder, robbery with a firearm, and aggravated battery. He's currently behind bars at the Hillsborough County Jail with bond set at $320,000, and Wright is being held without bond on suspicion of principal to aggravated battery, principal to attempted murder, and robbery with a firearm. Number 20. Niles Featherston. 19-year-old Anthony Barksdale was arriving at an apartment complex in Hermitage, Tennessee in November of 2023 when he was confronted by a gunman who seemed intent on gravely harming him. Later identified as 27-year-old Niles Featherston, the suspect chased after Barksdale and opened fire on the young man as he desperately ran toward the entrance of an apartment. The harrowing ordeal unfolded in plain view of a neighbor's doorbell camera, which recorded video of the victim entering a unit after being shot several times. After unloading the clip, Featherston fled the scene in a vehicle. He remained at large for the next 6 months and was finally arrested for first-degree murder in May of 2024. Featherston has multiple felony convictions on his record, including aggravated burglary, evading arrest, and facilitating attempted aggravated robbery. He was on probation for past offenses at the time of Barksdale's murder, and also has pending charges out of Nashville for aggravated assault and being a felon in possession of a gun. The accused murderer is currently awaiting trial from behind bars at the Davidson County Jail, with bail set at $500,000. Number 19. Schan Car Tran. In May of 2023, a 49-year-old Fairfax, Virginia man named Schan Car Tran went on a violent crime spree, which began when he approached a woman who was sitting in her car, asked if she was white, and bashed her windshield with a metal baseball bat. The victim exited the vehicle and ran from Pham, who was seen chasing her in broad daylight in a neighbor's doorbell camera footage. Pham proceeded to the office of U.S. Representative Jerry Connolly, where he asked to speak with the 73-year-old politician, then attacked 2 of his staff members. He struck an intern in the ribs on her first day working at the office, and another intern was hit repeatedly on the head, leaving them both injured following the assault. Authorities charged Pham with aggravated malicious wounding and malicious wounding. In a statement, Connolly described the defendant's actions as unprovoked, unexpected, and inexplicable. Neighbors told NBC News that Pham, who lived with his parents, suffered from mental illness. In January of 2022, more than a year prior to the attack on Connolly's staffers, police responded to his residence after receiving a call from a man stating that he wanted to harm people. Pham was combative toward responding officers, leading to his arrest for assaulting a police officer, trying to disarm an officer, and resisting arrest. The charges in the previous case were dropped after Pham agreed to cooperate with mental health treatment, and in August of 2024, a judge accepted his insanity plea in the more recent assault case. Rather than spend any time in prison or walk away with any criminal convictions, Pham was ordered to undergo treatment at a mental hospital. His defense attorney claimed that he wasn't properly medicated at the time of the attacks, which caused him to have delusions about government conspiracies and people putting him in harm's way. If his mental health improves, it's possible, or likely even, that he'll be released back into the free world. Number 18. Peter Norgrove. 58-year-old Sharon Gordon was a devout Jehovah's Witness who lived by a strict standard of nonviolence. In a painfully ironic twist, she became the target of a cold-blooded killer who spared no mercy when he bludgeoned her to death at her home in the English town of Dudley in July of 2023. The killer struck Gordon in the head with a hammer at least 8 times, leaving her with severe skull fractures and the catastrophic head injuries that ended her life. Doorbell camera footage from the woman's home showed a bricklayer entering and leaving the home on the day of the murder. Identified by investigators as 43-year-old Peter Norgrove, Gordon had met him at their local Kingdom Hall and had hired him to work on her house after he lost his job during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was Norgrove's first contracting job, and it didn't take long for Gordon to realize that he wasn't cut out for his newly chosen line of work. More than a year prior to her death, Gordon had paid Norgrove nearly $36,000 in advance for work he promised to do at the residence. They agreed to a 2-month deadline for completing the work, but progress was extremely slow going, and the work eventually fell a year behind. Norgrove's slow pace had already led to tensions between him and Gordon, and the situation reached a tipping point when he overheard Gordon complaining to her friends about the quality of his work. Surveillance video from the day of the murder showed Norgrove putting on gloves and entering the house less than a half hour after Gordon's friends left. Just seconds later, the doorbell camera captures horrifying audio of Gordon screaming in terror and agony. The sound of the killer's hammer repeatedly striking her head could also be heard. After 18 seconds, the noise stopped. 20 minutes later, Norgrove went outside and calmly loaded his work equipment into his car while whistling to himself. He drove to his mother-in-law's house, hid the murder weapon in her shed, and threw his bloody clothing in the garbage. Norgrove continued to carry on with his day like nothing major had happened, and even led a service at his Kingdom Hall later that evening. Detectives, tasked with investigating Gordon's death, narrowed their sights on Norgrove after his wife found his bloody clothes in the trash and turned them over to the police. In December 2023, he pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years. Number 17. Phony candy vendors target unsuspecting homeowners. In what neighbors described as a bold and ruthless home robbery, a man showed up at a Stockton, California home, posing as a door-to-door candy vendor in March of 2022. The unsuspecting homeowner bought a snack, but as soon as they handed over the cash, 3 additional masked men rushed up to the home in broad daylight and forced their way inside. They robbed the residents at gunpoint, making off with several of the owner's belongings. Several neighbors who weren't home at the time discovered home surveillance footage of the phony candy man ringing their doorbell. They could tell that something seemed off about the suspect, especially since it was typical to see kids selling candy door to door, but unusual for a man in his 20s to be doing it. Authorities shared the video with the public along with grainy footage of the thieves' getaway vehicle. The crime appears to remain unsolved, despite a $10,000 reward being offered for information leading to the suspect's arrests. Number 16. Harold Galini. In January of 2023, a 46-year-old Milwaukee man named Harold Galini approached the front door of a local residence where a woman lived with her child and grandchildren and repeatedly rang the doorbell. When no one answered, he began to leave. As he was walking away, he turned around and fired 7 shots into the home. 6 of the bullets were found inside a bedroom, and the 7th was found in the living room, making the family extremely fortunate that they were not in the gunfire's path. Galini fled the scene in a red Kia and was apprehended 4 days later during a traffic stop. He admitted to being the shooter in the victim's doorbell camera footage and was charged with 4 counts of recklessly endangering safety and 1 count of being a felon in possession of a firearm. The accused gunman has a lengthy rap sheet dating back to the mid-90s, with past charges consisting of failure to pay child support, felony bail jumping and other crimes. In 2015, he was accused of robbing a Subway restaurant with a machete. After the shooting, the victim told Fox 6 News that she no longer felt safe in her home and was planning to move. She didn't know Galini and had no idea why he had targeted her, and court documents offered no such explanation. A year after the bizarre incident, the defendant pleaded guilty to the gun charge and 2 counts of recklessly endangering safety. He was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay $5,700 in restitution to the victim. Number 15. George Vullio. An 18-year-old woman was returning home after walking her dog one morning in January of 2024 when a man attacked her in the hallway of her apartment building in Queens, New York. Doorbell camera footage showed the assailant stealthily approaching the victim from behind outside her 4th-floor apartment and attempting to abduct her. The teen fought back, leading to a struggle that would continue all the way down to the building's 1st floor. Her mother, Adriana Alvarez, overheard the commotion and rushed into the hallway, where she immediately stepped in to help fight off her daughter's attacker. Alvarez could be heard shouting at the man to go away as she physically intervened in the altercation. The suspect, 25-year-old George Vullio, attempted to flee as soon as the scuffle spilled outside, but a neighbor stepped in and restrained him until the police arrived. As it turned out, Vullio was no stranger to the victim. They had worked together at a local grocery store, where the young woman quickly noticed his sketchy behavior. Vullio allegedly stalked the teen, often hiding behind cars while spying on her, and the victim had a restraining order against him at the time of the assault. The level of aggression he showed during the attempted kidnapping spoke terrifying volumes about his intentions. That day, Alvarez and her daughter both suffered injuries, but were also thankful that the situation didn't get any worse. Vullio was charged with criminal contempt, assault, criminal possession of a weapon, unlawful possession of noxious matter, and harassment. He's currently in custody and the case appears to be ongoing. Number 14. Terror in Oakland. In January of 2020, a woman's blood-curdling screams rang out in the dead of night as a masked man ambushed her at gunpoint outside her Oakland, California home. The suspect attacked the woman in the normally safe and quiet neighborhood as she approached her front door at around midnight. Triggered by the activity, the victim's doorbell camera recorded the assailant jumping on her and aggressively throwing her to the ground. In the video, the attacker could be seen mugging the terrified woman and running off with her belongings. The footage was shared throughout the area and on social media, but it appears as though the suspect remains at large. Neighbors were both shaken and angry about the robbery, which left them feeling like the police weren't doing enough to keep the community safe. After the incident, around 60 residents attended a meeting to voice their concerns about the noticeable rise in street crime, which had given way to increased fears among locals. Some people had even become afraid to leave their homes during the day out of a concern that they might fall victim to a violent robbery. More than 4 years later, Oakland remains in the throes of a safety crisis, but leaders appear to be taking steps to combat the problem. Number 13. Casual intrusion in Fresno. A burglar seemed unusually calm, cool, and collected as he entered an unlocked Fresno, California home early one morning in March of 2024. The homeowner's doorbell camera captured footage of the man repeatedly coming and going over a roughly 30-minute period as the home's 3 occupants slept away, blissfully unaware of the intruder's presence. In the video, the thief could be seen carrying armfuls of stolen goods out of the residence, including a laptop, money, shoes, an electric guitar, and some earbuds. He even stopped to use the restroom and grabbed a bag of sunflower seeds for the road. The man fled the scene in a white Jeep, and the family filed a police report after they woke up and discovered their valuables missing. In the absence of any subsequent updates on the case, the culprit appears to still be at large. Today's topic was requested by Cassidy Michael, 7380 and PS603. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 12. Escambia County break-in. In May of 2021, sheriff's deputies in Escambia County, Florida, responded to a residence in Pensacola where they found a 54-year-old man dead from a gunshot wound to the head. He had children with the woman who lived at the home, but was not supposed to be there due to an active restraining order banning him from the property. To make the situation even more disturbing, the man was on his way to a court-mandated anger management class when he decided to stop at the house and confront his ex. The woman's home surveillance camera captured footage of him shouting at the top of his lungs while repeatedly kicking the front door. On his 6th kick, the door swung open. The man entered the residence, grabbed a knife, and stated his intentions to harm his children's mother. He went from one room to the next in search of the home's occupants, who had retreated to a room in the back of the house. When he entered the room where everyone was hiding, the woman shot him twice, killing him at the scene. She was cleared of any wrongdoing after investigators concluded that she acted within her right to defend herself under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Number 11. Ambush in Fayetteville. A Fayetteville, North Carolina man experienced a situation that was nothing short of terrifying when a group of robbers targeted him in a late-night home invasion in July of 2019. Dramatic doorbell camera footage showed a trio of suspects forcing the victim to unlock the door to his home, where his fiancée and young child were waiting for him to arrive. The man's fiancée frantically dialed 911 as she peered outside and saw the assailants mercilessly pistol whipping and beating the victim, who had a visible bleeding wound to his face. She later told local station WTVD that it looked like the thieves were trying to kill the man. Unsure of what else to do, she grabbed the couple's child and jumped out her back window, then called 911 a second time to provide more information about what was going on. Before fleeing the scene, the intruders smashed the family's doorbell camera, but the footage had already been recorded and it was quickly uploaded online and shared across local media outlets. In the meantime, police appealed to the public for information about the suspects, who unfortunately appear to still be at large. Number 10. Bradley Finnan and Larry Brodax. On April the 4th of 2020, Larry Brodax was killed while carrying out a robbery in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Although his accomplice Bradley Finnan didn't actually fire the gun that ultimately killed the 58-year-old burglar. He was arrested and charged with murder 3 days later. It was reported that Brodax had confided in 38-year-old Finnan about the presence of $200,000 in boxes at the Arlington Heights residence 20 years earlier and believed that the money could still be there. Taking advantage of the safety measures put in place in response to the COVID pandemic, both men covered their faces with surgical masks before conducting the break-in. The homeowner, who had a doorbell camera installed for security purposes, opened the door believing the 2 men to be landscapers. The robbers could then be seen pushing their way into the house, and only 27 seconds later, Finnan was pushed out the door. Brodax had been fatally shot inside the living room by the resident, who was determined to have acted in self-defense and thus wasn't charged. Because Brodax's death occurred during an attempted robbery, Finnan was held criminally responsible. Upon his arrest, the man was charged with felony murder and home invasion. Number 9. Madison Harris. On February the 24th of 2020, Madison Harris was murdered at her grandparents' house in southern Mississippi. James Waldeck, who was engaged to Harris's grandmother at the time, was alerted to the fact that something had happened by his doorbell security app, which indicated that an ambulance had been called to his home. The resulting recording showed 5 teenagers entering the property through the garage, which was followed by the sound of gunshots. The teens subsequently ran back outside as they were chased out by Harris's father. The images captured by the camera allowed investigators to quickly identify the perpetrators, some of whom had visited the house frequently in the days and weeks preceding the deadly incident and had even been considered friends of the victim. 2 weeks prior to Harris's murder, the home had been burglarized, and Waldeck told authorities that he suspected both crimes to have been committed by the same individuals. Due to the age of the 5 suspects, the names weren't immediately disclosed to the public. However, it was reported that they'd each been charged with capital murder. Number 8. Las Vegas Man.
I just have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? Are you positive? I just have a couple questions for you. Are you sure? Are you positive? Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain?
An unnamed Las Vegas man was arrested on July the 21st of 2021 after allegedly threatening to assault a woman outside her residence. The man's accuser, whose name wasn't revealed to the media, shared a video of the incident that had been captured by a doorbell camera. In the recording, the suspect could be seen knocking on her door repeatedly, explaining that he had several questions for the homeowner. The woman's husband, who wasn't home at the time, used the doorbell camera's intercom system to ask the stranger his name. Rather than identify himself, the stranger replied with a chilling confession, claiming that he wanted the woman in the house to come outside so that he could assault and murder her. He added that he was armed with both a gun and a knife, and continued to insist that the woman step outside. By the time police arrived at the scene, the stranger had already left. Thanks to the recording uploaded by the victim, a neighbor recognized the man and contacted the authorities, who subsequently made an arrest in connection to the incident. The unnamed man was reportedly charged with coercion, obstructing a public officer, and aggravated stalking. Number 7. Jennifer Chioma Ibichi. 25-year-old Michael Egwagu, a former varsity college football player, was caught on camera confessing to the murder of his sister, Jennifer Chioma Ibichi, aged 32. The video, recorded on December the 27th of 2019, showed Egwagu exiting Ibichi's home with a kitchen knife in hand, his clothes covered in blood. Before leaving the property, the man took off his clothes and was then heard saying, "I killed Jennifer. The latter had been pregnant at the time of her death, and the medical examiner who conducted her autopsy reported the presence of between 1 to 2 dozen stab wounds on her body on July the 17th of 2020. Following a bench trial, Ibishi was found not guilty by reason of insanity by presiding judge Julie Kokorik. He was subsequently transferred to a state hospital in order to undergo psychiatric treatment. Number 6. Gabriel West Jr. On November the 21st of 2019, Jonathan Qualls and Gabriel West Jr., both in their mid to late 20s, fatally shot Aaron Jones at his home in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jones, who'd allegedly sold illegal substances and sports gear out of his basement prior to his death, had installed a Ring security camera on both the front and side doors of his residence. Detectives were thus able to access recordings and pictures of the moments leading up to and immediately following the murder. Police discovered Jones's body in the basement, where he'd reportedly been shot to death, and also determined that money had been stolen. The images recorded by the doorbell camera, which showed the suspects entering the house and leaving with duffel bags in hand minutes later, were instrumental in the identification and arrest of Qualls and West. The former, who'd known the victim since childhood, agreed to testify against West as part of a plea bargain with prosecutors that sentenced him to 19 years for robbery. West, identified by his accomplice as the shooter, was handed down a minimum prison term of 55 years. Number 5. Michael Hettle. Former NASA executive Michael Hettle was filmed shooting his neighbor, National Guard member Javon Prather, 7 times during a fatal altercation at his home in Washington, D.C. on March the 3rd of 2020. In the footage recorded by the doorbell camera, 52-year-old Hettle was shown opening the front door and opening fire after the victim called on him to come out. The police arrived at the scene after having been alerted to the situation by concerned neighbors. According to eyewitnesses, the two men had been arguing over several property-related issues since 2016. Hettle later claimed to have been acting in self-defense, believing Prather was knocking on his door with the intention of harming him. The victim's wife assured officers that this was not the case and that Hettle had threatened to shoot her when she tried to retrieve her husband's body following the shooting. The footage was played in its entirety during Hettle's trial, leading to him being found guilty of first-degree murder in October of 2021. The following January, the man was consequently given a life sentence. Number 4. Jade Chan. On January the 16th of 2021, 23-year-old Jade Chan was ambushed outside a recording studio in Staten Island, New York, by 2 armed robbers. The incident was caught on a Ring doorbell camera which showed both assailants lying in wait until Chauncey stepped outside, at which point they pushed him back inside. Gunshots subsequently rang out before the perpetrators fled the scene. An ambulance was immediately called to the studio, but Chauncey died soon after being transported to the Staten Island University Hospital. The victim, a young entrepreneur, had founded the recording studio along with several friends the previous year. Darren Boyd and Ming Liu, who were 30 and 29 respectively at the time of the incident, were arrested 5 months later. They had allegedly planned the deadly robbery to recover money owed by someone associated with the studio. The latest available information on the case indicated that the 2 men had pleaded not guilty to their charges. Number 3. Clarence Stokes. On August the 27th of 2021, New Jersey man Clarence Stokes brutally murdered 44-year-old Latrick Avery and her fiancé, 67-year-old Stanley Gunter, at the couple's shared residence. After stabbing Gunter to death in the apartment, Stokes followed his second victim to a neighbor's house, as was captured by a doorbell camera. Avery frantically knocked on the door, screaming for help. As Stokes moved in on her, Upon reaching her, the assailant repeatedly stabbed her with a folding knife. By the time police arrived at the scene, Avery was lying unresponsive on the porch. She was rushed to the Hackensack University Medical Center in critical condition, but was declared dead shortly thereafter. Stokes was quickly identified as the couple's killer after detectives reviewed the recordings. Later that night, he was arrested, whereupon officers found traces of the victim's blood on his clothes. Stokes was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the incident's aftermath. Number 2. Albuquerque Prowler. Between February and May of 2021, a New Mexico woman received several notifications from her Ring doorbell camera regarding someone prowling around her Albuquerque home. The resident, who requested to remain anonymous, called 911 on 4 different occasions and even provided them with recordings of the stranger who was captured walking around her porch and attempting to peer into her windows. Francesca Perdue, a crime prevention specialist from the Albuquerque Police Department, indicated that while they've been alerted to the situation, the suspect has left the scene before the arrival of law enforcement on each occasion. If caught, the stranger faced a potential trespassing charge, which can be treated as a misdemeanor or felony depending on the situation. No further incidents were publicly reported as of the latest updates on the matter. If you thought these doorbell recordings couldn't get any more horrifying, find out how one mistake can get you killed in our previous release of When Mistaking People for Intruders Goes Wrong, coming up right after number 1. Number 1. Moren Martin. Ohio woman Moren Martin contacted the police after a stranger carrying a gun knocked on the door of her Toledo residence late one night in August of 2020. Martin informed officers that the man had been recorded by her Ring doorbell camera, which she'd turned on upon growing concerned that someone might be trying to gain access to her home. She refused to open the door as she kept a watchful eye on the man, who had a weapon tucked into his waistband as he stood outside her porch. When Martin continued to ignore his knocks, he walked away, followed by a second person who had been hiding nearby. While Martin was on the phone with 911, she reportedly heard someone prowling around her backyard, trying to open the door. The stranger was wearing a mask, making it virtually impossible to identify him through the surveillance recording. Nevertheless, local police distributed the video to the general public in the hopes that someone might recognize the suspect. Martin, who was left terrified by the incident, told reporters that each of her neighbors had indicated that they planned to purchase doorbell cameras to help bolster security in the area. The police in Pasadena, Texas, were called to an apartment on Burke Road near Fairmont shortly before 3:30 a.m. on July the 11th of 2022. Dispatchers received an emergency call from 22-year-old Bobby Wolf, who claimed he'd accidentally shot his girlfriend. Wolf reportedly heard someone trying to break into the apartment and grabbed his weapon to defend himself from what he thought was an intruder. He fired 7 shots, 6 of which connected with his target, who happened to be his partner, Krishina Lee. The latter was taken to the hospital where she later died. Wolf reportedly stayed at the scene and cooperated with investigators, telling them he thought Lee was a burglar. The family of the victim later disputed his account of the events that led to the shooting. Lee's cousin, Tasha McCoy, told ABC that the couple had a history of domestic violence. McCoy added that Wolf had been stalking Lee, saying he just wouldn't leave her alone. Wolf was later accused of intentionally killing Lee. As of the latest updates, the young man was being held in custody at the Harris County Jail on a $500,000 bond, charged with second-degree manslaughter. Number 9. Gina Williams. 48-year-old Gina Williams left work early during the early hours of January the 20th of 2017 and was shot by her husband, who thought she was a trespasser. The incident unfolded at the family's home in Goldsboro, North Carolina. One of the woman's children was awakened by a noise. The child then woke up Gina's 49-year-old husband, Billy, who grabbed his gun from the safe in one of the bedrooms and went to the front door. Upon opening the door, he saw the outline of a person but couldn't identify who it was because the porch light was turned off. Billy fired his weapon once, hitting Gina in the neck. Emergency medical personnel found the victim lying on the porch when they arrived, while Billy was attempting to administer first aid. The man later told police that he'd been expecting his wife to be home from her 12-hour shift at around 6 a.m. and hadn't anticipated her arriving so many hours earlier. In the aftermath, no charges were filed. Billy posted on his social media account saying he'd have to live with an unshakable burden for the rest of his life. He also revealed in the post that Gina's last words to him were, "I love you." Number 8. Alicia Gaston. In the early hours of January the 14th of 2016, 36-year-old Noah Gaston awoke to what he claimed sounded like walkie-talkies on the first floor of his home in Windham, Maine. He checked on his 3 children and then grabbed a shotgun. As he approached the stairwell, he encountered an individual coming up the stairs and opened fire. Unfortunately, it wasn't an intruder, but rather Noah's 34-year-old wife, Alicia, who fell down the stairs after being blasted with gunfire. Noah subsequently called 911 and notified authorities of the situation. The dispatcher instructed him on how to give his wife chest compressions while awaiting medical personnel. Upon arriving at the scene shortly after 6 a.m., paramedics attempted to revive Alicia, but she succumbed to the gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead. 2 months later, a grand jury indicted Noah on 1 count of intentional or knowing murder and 1 count of manslaughter. On February 11th of 2019, Noah pleaded not guilty to both counts. When the victim's sister took the stand, she was asked by the defense attorney if Noah loved Alicia, to which she replied, "I don't know." After he was found guilty in November of that same year, the court entered a judgment of conviction on the verdict, sentencing Noah to 40 years in the Department of Corrections. Number 7. Cesar Montelongo Sr. A Texas maintenance worker's lifeless body was found on the balcony of a Grand Prairie apartment complex on Christmas Eve 2022. Cesar Montelongo Sr. was checking on frozen and broken water lines that had ruptured at the Clayton Point Apartments on Alouette Drive. A resident who believed his apartment was being burglarized grabbed a gun and fired a single shot, hitting the 53-year-old through the window. The victim was found by responding officers at around 6 p.m. He was subsequently rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The man responsible for the shooting cooperated with detectives as they questioned him at his apartment. The case would later be referred to a Tarrant County grand jury for review. On January the 17th of 2023, a lawsuit against the apartment complex and the shooter was filed on behalf of Montelongo's family. The suit sought damages in excess of $1 million, alleging that the complex's management company, the Valcap Group LLC, failed to adequately inform residents about the pipe's maintenance and repair. Number 6. Joe Frasier Jr. In the city of Wyoming, Ohio, a man who'd been cleaning out his late grandmother's house was shot just after midnight on January the 30th of 2023. Local police were responding to the apartment on Durrell Avenue after receiving reports of a burglary in progress. According to the Wyoming police chiefs, officers found Joe Frasier Jr. and his father at the rear of the residence and thought they might be committing a home invasion. 28-year-old Joe Jr. refused to get out of his minivan when commanded to do so by police. Subsequently, the vehicle began moving in reverse before crashing into a tree, at which point it accelerated towards the officers, who fired 4 shots at the driver. Joe Jr. was shot, and the vehicle slammed into the building while his father fled. The officers forced their way into the vehicle, pulled Joe Jr. out, and administered him life-saving care before transporting him to a hospital where he died the following day. The Frasier family revealed that Joe Jr. and his dad had been helping his sister clear out the apartment. The officers who'd fired their guns were later placed on paid administrative leave. Authorities said that Joe Jr. and his father, who had active warrants related to previous offenses, absconded when police confronted them. On February the 3rd, the Hamilton County prosecutor announced that no charges were being filed against the Wyoming officers, saying the shooting was an act of self-defense. Number 5. Lindo Jones. On November the 8th of 2017, 31-year-old Texas man Lindo Jones was shot by a Mesquite police officer after being suspected of breaking into a car. The incident, which took place in a parking lot on Town East Boulevard, occurred after the officer in question responded to a 911 call about a car being broken into. When Officer Derek Wiley arrived at the scene, Jones was struggling to turn his truck alarm off. 35-year-old Wiley told Jones to get out of the vehicle. A struggle ensued between the two, which eventually led to Jones being shot twice. The man was then taken to a hospital. Police found out that the vehicle was in fact owned by Jones, but still charged him with evading arrest. After an internal investigation was launched, the Mesquite Police Department dropped the charge 6 days later. When the investigation concluded, it was determined that Officer Wiley had violated department policy and he was consequently fired. He was also charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon by a public servant after a Dallas County grand jury reviewed the case. Wiley turned himself in and posted a $300,000 bond on December the 6th. 9 months later, the jury tasked with deciding the former officer's fate failed to reach a unanimous decision. A second trial culminated in Wiley being found not guilty on July the 22nd of 2019. Number 4. Florida neighbor. A Florida man and his teen son fired their .45 caliber pistols at a woman after mistakenly thinking she wanted to rob their Cypress Gardens home on October the 15th of 2022. The incident reportedly originated from a mail delivery mix-up. A package of medicine meant for 73-year-old Gino Colon Acosta was accidentally delivered to his neighbor's apartment. When the neighbor noticed the package, he dropped it off at Gino's apartment shortly after 7 a.m. Gino and his son, Rocky, saw the man on their Ring doorbell camera and found him suspicious. With a gun in tow, Rocky went outside to look around, but by that time the neighbor had already left. Gino subsequently followed his son outside to help him search for the purported burglar. They spotted a car with tinted windows and the engine running approximately 100 yards from their home. Gino pointed his gun at the vehicle, demanding the occupant step outside. Thinking that she was being carjacked, the woman frantically put her car in reverse, causing her to crash into another vehicle. Meanwhile, Rocky fired a total of 5 shots at her. As the woman was driving away, Gino opened fire at the vehicle as well. The Colon Acostas then contacted law enforcement but were later arrested after the woman, who was uninjured, told investigators what transpired. Among other criminal counts, the pair were facing attempted murder charges. The Polk County Sheriff said in a press conference that he wanted to see the father and son behind bars, adding that they were way out of line. Number 3. Deborah Kelly. In the early morning hours of October the 10th of 2015, Texas woman Deborah Kelly was fatally shot inside her San Antonio home. The 48-year-old's husband, Lars Itzo, woke up shortly before 4 a.m. after he reportedly heard his dog growling at something. He grabbed his 20-gauge sawn-off shotgun before heading out onto the landing. After spotting a dark figure concealed in shadow, 48-year-old Itzo fired the weapon, and the suspected intruder collapsed to the floor. As he struggled to reload the shotgun, Itzo hurried back to the bedroom to retrieve a different gun. He then heard the sound of a woman moaning and realized that his wife wasn't in bed. She was out on the landing, suffering from a gunshot wound to the chest. Itzo called 911 and explained the tragic mistake he'd made while waiting for paramedics to arrive. The operator talked him through CPR and unplugging the victim's wound. Upon the arrival of emergency crews, Kelly couldn't be revived and was pronounced dead at the scene. Itzo was interviewed by police who found inconsistencies in his statements. He didn't have blood on his hands when paramedics arrived, despite claiming to have performed CPR on his dying wife. He was arrested on October the 21st before being released on a $75,000 bond. Itzo was ultimately found guilty of manslaughter in December 2015 and was consequently sentenced to 15 years in prison and fined $10,000. Number 2. Elhaj Bullock. 21-year-old Elhaj Bullock was shot while on his way back to his rental property in San Jose, California on October the 2nd of 2022. The young man was staying at an Airbnb across the street from a home belonging to Mark Henry Waters. As Bullock was returning to the property after going to the store, 67-year-old Waters exited his house and approached the young man with a gun that was later described as a Glock 22 semi-automatic handgun. Allegedly believing that Bullock was a burglar, Waters opened fire, leaving the renter with a broken femur. The victim was taken to a local hospital where he underwent emergency surgery. Waters was arrested at the scene, but posted a pre-arraignment bail of $100,000. The following month, he was formally charged with felony assault with a firearm, resulting in great bodily injury and involving the personal use of a firearm in connection with the shooting. Waters was later remanded into custody on a no-bail hold and pleaded not guilty on December the 12th. As of the latest updates, authorities continue to investigate possible hate crime allegations, but prosecutors hadn't filed any additional charges or enhancements. Waters' no-bail hold was upheld by the judge, who said that the man's actions posed a public safety concern on every conceivable level. Number 1. Nadja Presley. Authorities in South Carolina criminally charged a Greenville man who killed his own 23-year-old daughter, Nadja Presley, whom he mistook for an intruder. Nadja was bringing food to her father, Jermaine Presley, at around 1:15 a.m. on May the 19th of 2019. The 43-year-old man heard someone trying to enter his Young Street residence through the front door and subsequently fired multiple shots. The gunfire severely wounded Nadja and she ultimately died at the scene. Responding officers found heroin and cocaine inside the home and arrested Jermaine on drug and weapons charges the next day. After further investigation, his charges were later amended to include murder, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and 3 counts of being a felon in possession of a firearm. At a hearing held in Greenville County Court, family members said they believe the shooting was an accident. As Jermaine's cousin took the stand and gave her statement, the man was seen shaking and sobbing. On June the 14th, his bond was set at $50,000 and was ordered to wear a GPS monitoring device if he bonded out. According to the state's inmate database, Jermaine was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 5 years of incarceration. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live in a mansion in a really bad neighborhood or live in a small studio apartment surrounded by a mansion in an affluent country club? Let us know in the comments section below.